I used to believe that love could heal everything, that if you gave enough of yourself, if you sacrificed your time, your comfort, your dreams, then the people you cared for would see it, honor it, and give you love in return. But I was wrong. What I learned instead was one of the most painful lessons of my life. Sometimes the more you give, the easier it is for others to take you for granted, to step on you as though you were never there at all. My name is Hannah. I'm 36 years old and I've lived through enough heartbreak to fill 1,000 lifetimes. But the deepest wound I carry isn't from an enemy or a stranger. It's from the people I once called family. And if you're listening to me now, I want you to know that this isn't just a story about betrayal. This is a story about the slow unraveling of trust, the silent breaking of bonds, and the final moment when I learned the power of walking away. When I first met Daniel, he was a widower. His wife had passed away tragically, leaving him with 2 young children, a boy and a girl who were far too young to understand the enormity of their loss. Benjamin was 4, then restless, bright-eyed, always with toy cars clutched in his hands, as though racing them across the world could help him escape his grief. Little Ella was barely a toddler, still wobbling on her feet, still clinging to her father's leg for safety wherever he went. I remember the first time I visited their home. The air was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that comes after weeks of tears. Toys lay scattered across the floor, but no laughter filled the rooms. Daniel looked exhausted, his eyes hollow, his posture bent, as if carrying the weight of 2 lives, and his own sorrow all at once. And in that moment, my heart broke for him. Not because I felt pity, but because I recognized a man who had given everything to hold his family together and was running out of strength. I hadn't planned on becoming anyone's stepmother. I had dreams of my own back then, career goals, travel plans, a life where I could decide who I was without compromise. But something inside me shifted when I saw those children. I thought maybe this is my calling. Maybe I can give them what they've lost. Maybe I can be the mother they so desperately need. And so I stepped in. Not because anyone begged me to, not because I felt trapped, but because I wanted to. I cooked for them, tucked them in at night, attended every school play and birthday, and made sure that their little lives were filled with as much stability as I could give. In the beginning, it felt like love was blooming in our house again. Slowly, they started calling me Mom. Ella's little arms would wrap around my neck, Benjamin would look for me in the audience at every event, and Daniel, he'd watch with gratitude in his tired eyes. Those years were not easy, but they were full of laughter, full of scraped knees and bedtime stories, full of birthday cakes that I stayed up late decorating even when I had work the next morning. And I told myself, this is it, this is my family. I may not have given them life, but I was giving them everything I had. But nothing lasts forever, does it? What I didn't know back then was that love, no matter how pure, doesn't guarantee respect. And sometimes the very people you sacrifice for are the ones who will turn against you the quickest. It started with small things. At first it was just little sighs of impatience from the kids when I reminded them to do their homework, eye rolls when I asked them to clean their rooms. The way Benjamin, now a teenager, would glance at me as though I was a nuisance, as though my words were nothing more than background noise. Ella followed his lead. After all, she adored her brother and copied everything he did. I told myself it was just adolescence. Teenagers are difficult. They push boundaries, test rules, try to find independence. I thought if I stay patient, if I stay loving, they'll come back around. So I brushed off the snide comments, the slammed doors, the sarcastic remarks. I kept giving. I kept forgiving. But one night, everything changed. Benjamin had started staying out late, ignoring curfews, ignoring calls. I waited up for him one evening, pacing the living room with my heart pounding in my chest. When he finally walked in past midnight with no explanation, I asked softly, "Where have you been?" I expected annoyance, maybe even anger, but I didn't expect the words that came next. "You're not even my real mom," he spat. "Stop acting like you can tell me what to do." For a moment, my body went numb. It was as if all the years of love, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights and endless care were erased in a single breath. And then Ella, my sweet little Ella, who once clung to me as though I was her whole world, chimed in with her soft, cruel echo. Yeah, you're just someone Dad married. I turned to Daniel, desperate for him to say something, anything, to correct them, to defend me, to remind them of all I had done. But he just stood there, silent, expressionless. He didn't comfort me, didn't scold them. He didn't even look at me. That silence was the sharpest knife. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I could feel years of love, years of hope, years of trying splintering like glass. I still told myself it was just one fight, one ugly outburst, something we could work through. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. The disrespect only grew worse from there. They stopped listening altogether, mocking me openly, making sure I felt like an outsider in the very home I had built for them. And Daniel, oh Daniel, he didn't just fail to defend me, he joined them. One evening after Ella had left a mess in the kitchen, I calmly asked her to clean up. She sneered, "Why don't you do it? Isn't this your house?" Before I could answer, Benjamin smirked. "You're not even our mom, so stop acting like it." And then Daniel, my husband, the man I thought was my partner, my equal, looked at me without a shred of sympathy and said in the coldest voice, "They're right, Hannah. You should probably back off." I can't describe what shattered in me that night. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just hurt. It was clarity. Clarity that I was never truly seen as family, never truly respected, never truly loved the way I thought I was. That was the night I realized I had been nothing more than a placeholder, a convenience, a wallet, a maid, a ghost in a home I thought was mine. And for the first time, I asked myself, if they don't want me as a mother, why am I still breaking myself to act like one? The night after Daniel told me to back off, I sat in our bedroom with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled laughter of the three of them downstairs. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Every laugh sounded like a dagger, every whisper like poison, and I realized I was the only one in that house who felt alone. I thought about everything I had given them over the years. The sleepless nights rocking Ella through fevers, the countless afternoons driving Benjamin to practice cheering louder than anyone else in the stands. The birthdays I stayed up until dawn, decorating cakes, wrapping presents, and stringing balloons just so they would feel celebrated. The sacrifices I had made, working longer hours, cutting back on my own needs, all so they could have more. And yet in their eyes, I was still a stranger, an outsider, just someone Dad married. That phrase haunted me. It echoed in my head like a curse. Just someone. The next morning, I couldn't even bring myself to greet them at the breakfast table. I poured my coffee in silence while they chattered about their day, none of them noticing the way my hands shook. Or maybe they did notice and just didn't care. For the first time in years, I considered what my life would look like if I stopped trying, if I stopped being the mother they refused to acknowledge, if I let them see what life was like without my endless giving. It was a cruel thought, one I hated myself for even imagining. But once it entered my mind, I couldn't shake it. So I did it. I stopped. I stopped waking them up for school. If they overslept, that was their problem. I stopped cooking elaborate dinners. If they wanted to eat, they could figure it out. I stopped hovering over their grades, stopped folding their laundry, stopped cleaning up their messes. At first they laughed. Benjamin smirked, saying, "Good now, we don't have to listen to her nagging all the time." Ella shrugged. "We don't need her anyway." And Daniel? He said nothing. He let them believe it was some kind of victory. But what none of them realized was that I had been the glue holding our lives together. Without me, the cracks began to show. Slowly, their comfort began to unravel. At first, it was little inconveniences. They were late for school more often because no one was there to drive them. They ate cold leftovers instead of warm meals. Their clothes piled up unwashed, wrinkled, and smelling of neglect. But then the bigger cracks began to appear. The bills. Daniel had always left the finances to me. I made sure everything was paid on time, that the lights stayed on, the water ran, the house was warm. Now I stopped covering the gaps he created with his reckless spending. I stopped quietly paying for Benjamin's broken gadgets and Ella's endless shopping sprees. And suddenly the house that had always run smoothly started to feel like a machine breaking down. Benjamin came storming into the living room one evening, throwing a broken phone on the table. "Mom, buy me a new one," he demanded, using that word like it still belonged to me. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm not your mom, remember? Ask your real family." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through bone. Ella's wide eyes flicked between us. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Daniel, sitting on the couch, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Not a single word. That night, Benjamin slammed doors and cursed under his breath. Ella cried quietly in her room. And me, I lay in bed numb, wondering how long it would take before they realized the truth that the love they dismissed was the very foundation of their comfort. Weeks passed. The resentment in the house grew thicker, heavier. They started lashing out more aggressively, trying to provoke me into the role I had abandoned. One morning, I found my favorite blouse shredded to ribbons in the trash. Another day, I noticed deep scratches along the side of my car. At first, I told myself it couldn't be them. They were still just kids. But when I checked the security cameras one night there, they were Benjamin and Ella laughing as they destroyed my belongings. It wasn't just disrespect anymore, it was cruelty. And Daniel, he still stayed silent. He saw the evidence, heard my pleas, and all he said was, "They're just acting out. Don't overreact." Overreact. That was his answer to years of sacrifice torn apart in front of my eyes. I knew then that I couldn't stay. But walking away from a family, even one that doesn't love you, is like cutting off a piece of yourself. I had built my identity around being their mother, their protector. Who was I if I wasn't that anymore? I started documenting everything: the shredded clothes, the keyed car, the threatening text messages Benjamin sent me late at night, the way Ella sneered as though daring me to fight back. I kept a folder with photos, messages, and notes, knowing that one day I might need them. Quietly, I began planning my exit. The turning point came one evening when Daniel confronted me in the kitchen. His face was red with anger, his voice sharp. "You're acting like a child, Hannah. What kind of woman punishes her own family because her feelings are hurt? You're neglecting your responsibilities." Responsibilities. That was the word he used. Not love, not partnership, not respect. I asked him, my voice shaking, "Why don't you ever defend me? Why do you always let them treat me like this?" And then he said it. The words that finally broke me beyond repair. "Because I agree with them. You were never really their mother." It was like ice flooded my veins. He went on sneering. "I raised them alone before you came, and I can do it again. You've always been too controlling." I should have screamed. I should have thrown every memory, every sacrifice, every act of love in his face. But instead I felt a strange, twisted sense of relief. Because for the first time he had spoken the truth. The truth I had always feared but never wanted to admit. I was never really part of their family. I was just a placeholder. A convenience. That night I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I simply nodded, turned around, and walked away. Not because I was weak, but because I was done. In the days that followed, I finalized my plan. I met with a lawyer, handed over all the documentation I had collected, and began the process of separation. I filed police reports for the damage done to my property, not because I expected immediate justice, but because I wanted every piece of evidence on record. I opened new bank accounts in my name, moved what I could, and closed the doors they once used to drain me. And one morning, without fanfare, without goodbye, I left. I packed only the things that mattered to me. The photographs, the keepsakes of my own past before them, the clothes and books and pieces of myself I had long buried under the weight of being their mother. I left the house as quietly as I had entered it years ago, but this time I carried with me something far more valuable than belongings. I carried freedom. On the kitchen counter, I left an envelope. Inside were the papers that would unravel the life we had built, the divorce documents, copies of the report's evidence of the cruelty I had endured. I imagined the look on Daniel's face when he found them, the moment he realized I was no longer there to clean up his mess. And I didn't look back. The first morning after I left, I woke up in a small rented apartment with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a suitcase half unpacked. The room was bare, the air smelled faintly of paint, and the silence was so sharp it almost rang in my ears. For years I had lived in constant noise, slammed doors, raised voices, footsteps running through hallways. Now there was nothing but stillness. And strangely it felt like oxygen. I made myself a cup of instant coffee, sat cross-legged on the floor, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to rush. I didn't have to brace myself for disrespect. I didn't have to measure my words, anticipate insults, or shrink myself to keep the peace. The quiet wrapped around me like a blanket, and though it was lonely, it was also liberating. Meanwhile, back at the house, reality was setting in. I knew Daniel well enough to imagine his reaction when he found the envelope. At first, he probably thought I was bluffing, that this was just another attempt to teach them a lesson. He had always underestimated me. He never believed I would actually walk away. But when he flipped through the pages, legal documents stamped and signed, police reports, evidence neatly filed, I'm sure his confidence cracked. I didn't answer his calls. My phone buzzed relentlessly for hours that first day, his name flashing again and again. Then came the texts. First angry. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. Then desperate. Come home. We can fix this. And finally bitter. You were never strong enough for this family anyway. I let them all sit unread. But when the messages from Daniel began to slow, new ones appeared from Benjamin and Ella. At first they were curt. Benjamin wrote, "We don't need you. Stay gone." Ella followed with, "Don't bother coming back. We're fine without you." I stared at the words, my chest heavy. These were the children I had raised, the ones who once clung to me for comfort, now so eager to throw me away. I locked my phone and set it aside, refusing to give their cruelty more of my heart. Weeks passed. My life slowly began to rebuild. I poured myself into work, took on extra projects, stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because it gave me purpose. On weekends, I wandered the city alone, rediscovering who I was without them. I joined a yoga class, reconnected with friends I had neglected, even started painting again, something I hadn't touched since my 20s. Little by little, the pieces of me I thought were gone forever began to resurface. And then the messages changed. It started with Benjamin. One evening, my phone buzzed with a simple line, "Hey, can we talk?" I almost laughed. The audacity of it. After everything he had said, after he had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't his real mother, he wanted to talk. I didn't reply. A few days later, another message, "I know you probably hate me, but things aren't good right now. Please." Still, I stayed silent. Then Ella reached out. Her message was softer. "Hi, Hannah. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay." Seeing her write my name instead of Mom stung more than I expected. For years she had called me Mother. Now I was just Hannah again, reduced to nothing more than a title stripped away by her own lips. I didn't respond. But the messages kept coming. Slowly they changed in tone. The arrogance faded. The cruelty softened. Regret began to creep in. Ella wrote, "I'm sorry for the things I said. I didn't mean them. I was just mad." Benjamin followed with, "We shouldn't have treated you the way we did. It's been hard since you left." And then came the one that almost broke me, "I miss you." I sat on my bed, phone in hand, tears blurring my vision. For so long I had wanted those words. I had wanted acknowledgement, remorse, even the smallest hint of gratitude. And now that it was finally here, I couldn't believe it. It felt too late. Their apologies, their regrets, it all came after they had shattered me beyond repair. So I let the messages pile up. Dozens of unread confessions, attempts at reconciliation, desperate cries into the void. I didn't answer a single one. Because here's the truth I had come to accept: sometimes people only realize your value once you're gone. And by then it's too late. Back at the house, things began to unravel without me. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Daniel was struggling financially. Without my careful budgeting, bills went unpaid. The kids, once spoiled with shopping trips and fast food weekends, were suddenly living with less. Benjamin missed rides to school and had to take the bus. Ella's phone broke and there was no one to replace it. Their perfect little bubble had burst. And I smiled. Not out of cruelty, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because it was proof. Proof that I had mattered. Proof that all those years of sacrifice weren't invisible, even if they never admitted it while I was there. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. For so long I had defined my worth through their acceptance. I thought being a good mother, a good wife, meant enduring disrespect, sacrificing my dignity, and giving until I was empty. I believed that if I stayed patient enough, loyal enough, loving enough, they would eventually love me back. But love without respect isn't love at all, it's bondage. And the day I walked away, I broke my own chains. There were nights when loneliness pressed heavy against my chest, when I questioned whether I had done the right thing. Memories of laughter of birthdays, of the times when Benjamin hugged me, or Ella whispered, "I love you, Mom," would sneak into my mind like ghosts. They haunted me, reminding me of what could have been if things had turned out differently. But then I would remember the silence. Daniel's silence when I was humiliated in front of the children, his silence when they destroyed my belongings, his silence when I begged for even a shred of support. And I knew I had chosen freedom over a prison that had never truly been mine. One afternoon, months later, I ran into a mutual friend at a cafe. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You look happy, lighter." And I realized I was. The weight was gone. The bitterness that had eaten at me for years had lifted. I was building a life not defined by their rejection but by my own resilience. And still, every now and then, I would see another message pop up on my phone. Ella, writing, "Can we start over, Benjamin? I know we were wrong. Please, just give us a chance. Daniel. The kids need you. I need you." But I never replied. Because the woman they had dismissed, the mother they had rejected, the partner they had betrayed, that woman no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who finally understood that you don't have to stay where you're not valued. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting harder to be seen, but walking away to protect your own soul. It had been nearly 6 months since I walked away when the confrontation I always knew was coming finally arrived. I was leaving work late one evening, the sun dipping low behind the skyline, when I saw Daniel standing by my car. His shoulders slumped, his face pale, his once proud posture broken down into something that almost looked desperate. For a moment, I considered turning around, pretending I hadn't seen him. But before I could move, he spotted me. "Hannah," he said, his voice cracking in a way that startled me. "Please, just listen." Every instinct in me screamed to keep walking. But some part of me, the part that still carried echoes of love, the part that remembered the man I once thought he was, stopped me in my tracks. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my tone flat, void of the warmth I had once given him so freely. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting as though searching for the right words. "Things are bad," he admitted. "Really bad. The kids, they're out of control. Benjamin barely comes home anymore. Ella's been skipping school. I can't handle them on my own." I almost laughed. For years I had carried that weight, discipline, responsibility, the constant balancing act of love and structure. And when I needed him to stand beside me, he let me drown. Now here he was begging for the life raft I had once been. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you're their mother," he said quickly, desperately. "No matter what was said before you raised them, you were the one who held this family together. I see that now. Please, they need you." The words hit me like a cruel joke. He had stood silent when they called me just someone Dad married. He had sneered, "You were never really their mother." And now, with his world crumbling, he wanted to rewrite the truth. I shook my head. "No, Daniel. They don't need me. They need the father who refused to defend me. They need the man who chose silence over loyalty." His jaw tightened, but I could see it in his eyes, the realization, the regret. Still, regret doesn't erase years of betrayal. "You don't understand," he tried again. "We can fix this. We can be a family again." I stepped closer, meeting his gaze with a steadiness I didn't feel 6 months ago. "No, Daniel. We can't. Because I was never your family. I was your convenience, your safety net, and I refuse to be that again." I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and left him standing there in the fading light, his figure growing smaller in my rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. His words echoed in my mind, "You're their mother. You held this family together." For a moment, I felt the pull of what once was the ache of the years I had invested, the ghosts of laughter and birthdays and bedtime stories. But I reminded myself of the nights I sat alone while they mocked me, of the silence that greeted me when I begged for respect. And I remembered I didn't walk away from love. I walked away from abuse disguised as family. A few weeks later, it was Ella who found me. She showed up at the small cafe I often visited on Sundays, her frame thinner, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. She spotted me across the room and froze. I could see the battle raging inside her, the pride that wanted to turn back the longing that pushed her forward. She finally approached, her voice trembling. "Hi, Hannah." I set my cup down slowly. "Ella." Her hands twisted together nervously. I just... I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't mean it. I was just a kid, I didn't know what I was saying. Oh." For a moment my chest tightened. She wasn't wrong. She had been just a kid swept up in the arrogance of adolescence, mirroring her brother emboldened by her father's silence. But being a kid didn't erase the scars her words had left. "I hear you," I said softly. "But sorry doesn't erase the past. You can't undo what's been done." Tears welled in her eyes. "I miss you. I miss the way things used to be. I thought, maybe we could start over." I studied her face, searching for the little girl who once clung to me, who whispered, "I love you, Mom," into my ear before bed. And I saw glimpses of her faint but still there. But I also saw the truth that love cannot survive without respect, and trust once shattered doesn't rebuild so easily. "I'll always care about you, Ella," I said gently. "But I can't go back. Some things break and never heal the same way." She cried silently, her shoulders trembling. I wanted to reach out to hold her, to erase the pain, but I kept my hands folded on the table, because sometimes love means letting go even when every part of you aches to hold on. Benjamin never came to see me. His pride was too great, his anger too raw, but I knew he felt the loss. His messages grew less defensive, more fragile. I messed up. "I know I did. Please just answer me." I never did, because by then I had learned that my silence was the only power I had left. The climax of it all came one evening when a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from Daniel. His handwriting uneven, rushed. He confessed that he had failed not just as a husband, but as a father. He admitted that he had let his pride, his fear, and his need for control blind him to the truth. He wrote that he wished he could turn back time, that he could undo the years of silence and cruelty. He begged me for one more chance, for the sake of the children, for the sake of what we once had. I read every word, tears streaming down my face, not because I wanted him back, but because it was the apology I had once prayed for. And yet, when I finished the letter, I folded it neatly, placed it back in its envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. Because apologies don't erase scars, and I wasn't willing to return to a place where I had been broken. The real climax wasn't his letter or Ella's tears or even Benjamin's regret. The real climax was the moment I realized I didn't need any of them to validate my worth, that I was whole on my own, that walking away hadn't been weakness, it had been the strongest, bravest choice of my life. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The weeks after Daniel's letter felt strangely calm. The constant buzzing of my phone had slowed, the desperate attempts at contact from Benjamin and Ella faded into silence. It was as if the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a strange kind of emptiness. But in that emptiness, I began to rebuild. I poured myself into work in a way I never could when my every waking hour revolved around trying to hold together a family that didn't want me. My boss noticed my focus, my clients noticed my dedication, and slowly doors began to open. Promotions, opportunities, invitations, things I had once pushed aside, for school recitals, for last-minute emergencies, for endless sacrifices. I started traveling too. Small trips at first, weekends by the coast, afternoons wandering museums. Then longer journeys, places I had once only dreamed about but never allowed myself to pursue. For years I had given my life to people who treated me as though I was invisible. Now I was finally visible to myself. But healing wasn't just about career or travel. It was about rediscovering the parts of me I had silenced. I took up painting again, filling canvases with colors I hadn't touched since my 20s. I laughed with old friends, went to concerts, sat in coffee shops with a book, and let myself exist without guilt. Slowly, I began to feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. Still, there were nights when the memories returned. Birthdays filled with laughter, little arms wrapping around my neck, whispered words of love from a child who once needed me. Those memories haunted me, reminding me of what could have been. Sometimes in the quiet of my apartment, I would find myself whispering into the darkness, "Did I do enough? Was I really ever their mother?" And each time I had to remind myself, Love cannot survive where there is no respect. You can pour your soul into people, but if they refuse to see you, you cannot force them to. The last time I saw Ella was almost a year after I left. She found me again, this time outside a bookstore. She looked older, weighed down by a year of hardship. Her eyes met mine with a softness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi, Ella," I answered. She swallowed hard, tears pooling. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did for us. I didn't see it then, but I do now. I know it's too late, but I needed to say it." For a moment, I felt the walls around my heart tremble. I wanted to hug her, to tell her I forgave her, to take her in my arms like I had when she was small. But I didn't. Instead, I reached out and gently touched her hand. "I'll always hope you find happiness, Ella, but some things can't go back to the way they were." She nodded, her chin quivering, and then she turned and walked away. I watched her until she disappeared into the crowd, my chest aching but steady, because I knew that moment was the closest thing to closure I would ever get. Benjamin never came. His pride kept him silent. Maybe one day he'll understand what he lost, or maybe he never will. But I've stopped waiting for that day. As for Daniel, his letter was the last piece of him I allowed into my life. I never replied. I never saw him again. Sometimes I wonder if he still tries to convince himself that he was right, or if he finally lies awake at night realizing what his silence cost him. Either way, it's no longer my burden to carry. Because the truth is, I didn't lose a family. I lost people who never saw me as family in the first place. And I gained myself. Walking away was the hardest decision I ever made. Not because I still wanted them, but because I had convinced myself for so long that love meant enduring disrespect, that being a good wife and good mother meant erasing myself. But now I know better. Love without respect isn't love. Family without loyalty isn't family. And giving without being valued isn't noble, it's self-destruction. Today, I wake up in a home that is truly mine. I drink my coffee in peace. I look in the mirror and see someone who survived betrayal. Someone who rebuilt herself piece by piece. Someone who finally understands that her worth doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. And if there's one lesson I want you to take from my story, it's this: never beg for respect. Never waste your life trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. And never ever forget that walking away is sometimes the bravest act of love you can give to yourself. Because sometimes the family you lose is nothing compared to the self you reclaim. So if you're listening to this right now and you've ever felt invisible, ever felt used, ever felt like no matter how much you give, it's never enough, please hear me when I say this: you deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve love that doesn't make you beg for scraps. And you deserve a life where you are seen, heard, and valued. Don't be afraid to walk away from the people who break you. Don't be afraid to rebuild. It's never too late to choose yourself. And that, my friends, is how I found my freedom. If my story touched you, please let me know in the comments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and honest, make sure to like, subscribe, and join me here again. Together, we'll keep uncovering the truths that remind us we're never truly alone.